You're listening to Journey for Truth with internationally known medium, Tai Yi practitioner, and radio host Tammy Urbanic.
Hello and welcome to Journey for Truth on Spreaker.com and on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. I am Tammy Urbanic. Journey for Truth Radio is always on demand and with many new episodes. Visit my website at empowermentthroughhealing.org. You can peruse my website. You can sign up for my free newsletter, and you can also find out more information on Life Energy Flow Tai Yi. Life Energy Flow Tai Yi is an ancient healing modality, and my website offers just a ton of information on the benefits of Tai Yi and the different types of treatments that are out there. My guest this week is Alain Nu. Alain is an entertainer. He has an uncanny ability to perform what some people might call magic. He has entertained at 3 inaugural balls and multiple Las Vegas events. He's quite the fascinating guest. Alain, welcome.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Let's begin with exactly what you do. What is mentalism?
Well, mentalism is, my definition of it, which is in its most broad sense, would be any type of demonstration that would be of or relating to the mind or consciousness or human potential. So anything that can give people that feeling or give people an example of it in a demonstration type of form would be considered mentalism. So sometimes it's like a magic trick that has a mind-related slant to it. Sometimes it's a test like the chess pawn gambit, where you have the chess pawn in one hand and you try to choose which hand has got the white pawn, for instance.
Right.
And sometimes, and sometimes it involves deeper things like neuro-linguistic programming, being able to guide people's intentions by communication, being able to be empathic to certain people's signals and energies as you're going through your demonstrations. And I find that there's lots of different ways of being able to explore it. So sometimes you can explore it in ways that are kind of more theatrical, and sometimes you can explore it in ways in which it's actually more of an experiment that ends with you learning something about the mind and about how it works.
So when you talk about paying attention to people's energies and being sensitive to that, are you talking about being intuitive?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone has a little bit of intuition that they can pick up on, and in fact, the more you think about it, the more it's possible to just kind of search within yourself and realize where the truth is. And in my opinion, I don't necessarily call it intuition, but it's really just kind of more of I think it's more kind of like empathy. It's you're just kind of feeling the overall state of things and getting an interpretation within your own self as to what that means.
When you talk about mentalism, can you give us an example of perhaps something that you've been able to do or that you have done with an audience or a participant?
Well, my show, which performs all over the place. I do presentations and programs for casinos and theaters and cruise ships and corporate events, and during the holidays, lots of holiday events. That particular show consists of all kinds of different types of demonstrations, and I do offer a plethora of different demonstrations and stunts and mind stunts, and they range. So sometimes I'm really using something that allows me to get an intuitive feeling off of the person that I'm working with, and sometimes I'm using elements of hypnosis or elements of trance to be able to get people to gain their own insight, and sometimes I'm using my own powers of mind over matter to be able to kind of move situations or move my or even bend metal, if you will. So, I mean, I do an entire program which offers people what used to be called the Geller effect. When Uri Geller was famous, he was, I guess he's still famous, but back when he was at the height of his career, one of the things that he would do would be to bend metal. And everybody knows of him to be a spoon bender, but the interesting thing about Geller was that he was able to do it literally through the radio waves or through the airwaves in such a way that people could be holding onto their own spoons in front of the television sets, and suddenly it seems like the spoons are bending. And
That's
things
fascinating.
are happening that feel inexplicable, because you can't control what you're doing necessarily, or can he? And so it's so that has always been appealing to me, just because it's one of the many things that it's a claim that has an inexplicable result that in which you can try. And so a lot of times when I do live radio show broadcasts and stuff like that, I will try to do the same type of thing. I'll try to channel the Geller inside of me to reach people and cause their spoons to bend. And what's great about it is that back in the old days, back in the 70s and stuff, we used to have things like light up telephone boards and stuff like that. And these days we don't have that anymore, but we have this greater thing called Twitter, and suddenly we're getting like photographs of spoons bent on the Twitter feed and on their Facebook page and stuff. And it was lots of fun watching that actually happen, and it still kind of baffles and confuses me to some degree as to exactly what's going on. I've done this live in my live programs, in which people actually come and they are told to bring in their own cutlery and their own silverware and stuff. And I saw this one woman bring in this big giant spoon that I was completely convinced wasn't going to bend. And by the end of the program, she had actually bent it completely in half. And I have a picture of it right now. I'm really excited. I was really excited to see that could actually happen in a show like mine. So
that's an example. That's an example of mind over matter, where you can use your mind to manipulate an object, a hard object. What about the hypnosis? What exactly are you doing with a participant where you put them under hypnosis and bring out information?
Well, people's subconscious sort of does it all for themselves. And when we talk about hypnosis, and when people hear about a hypnotist coming to town, or the potential of seeing a hypnotist and stuff, a lot of fears will enter their mind. Things like, is he going to have control over me? Am I going to reveal aspects of myself that are private and that I don't want other people to know? Am I going to lose control of my own body? And so
valid questions.
Huge fears for hypnotists, but the truth of the matter is that a hypnotist can never hypnotize you to the point of you doing anything like that, unless it was secretly within your desire to actually do those things, and he was just bringing that out. So the idea behind hypnosis is to literally just guide you into your own subconscious, and then you can do all kinds of things with yourself. You can bring out, a good hypnotist will be able to bring people's memories out using just a pendulum. Essentially, the idea is to just have people reach an aspect of their subconscious where their conscious mind, which is the part of their mind that tells them what they can and cannot do. So,
right.
I can't stop eating, or I can't quit smoking cigarettes. And, I think that what happens is that when you can remove the conscious mind from the picture and you're working with their subconscious, there's just nothing but pure potential that you're working with, and all kinds of things can come out. Everything from being able to tap into an aspect of their mind that might realize some kind of synchronicity later on, to being able to bend metal. So interestingly, my perception on the whole metal bending thing is really that it is the perfect metaphor for being able to shape and and control your own destiny. So the idea of being able to bend metal, because a lot of people go, so why bend spoons? And my answer to that question is that number one, it's a mentalism effect. It's something that occurs as a mentalism demonstration, number one. And so as an art form, which is what I believe mentalism is, my feeling is that what you end up with is an artifact of what you were able to do that proves to yourself that you're able to shape your own existence. You're able to shape and control your own reality.
Which is exactly what people want to hear, and what a lot of people are seeking to learn is, how do I create my own reality? How do I stay in charge of my own reality? And essentially that's what you're helping people understand, is being in charge of your own mind and having that strong sense of self.
Exactly. And what's interesting about my book is that there is an aspect of mentalism, as we're talking about, that's purely theatrical. That's all about just entertaining people and showing them a good time and stuff. But my feeling about the reason for me writing this book is really to share with people this notion that we see magic as this one thing, that it's a deception, that it's entertaining, that it's an illusion, though, that it really isn't real, and that it's for children, but the reality of it is that it's all fake. And so there's this perception behind magic that kind of, in my opinion, takes away half of the picture, because I believe that deception and illusion and stuff like that is definitely half of what magic has to offer. Mm-hmm. And I think that part of the reason why it has to offer that is because as an art form, the goal is to reflect and to react to the reality around us. And magic essentially does that, but in a different way than a lot of art, because a lot of art might exemplify what is real, whereas magic actually can sometimes show you some pretty absurd things. And but my feeling is that when mentalism and when magic is performed at a higher level, you are sort of getting the art form, and you are receiving metaphors to greater things, and the inspirations that you can derive from that can be can make further connect you to greater possibilities.
Well, so, speaking of magic, how is mentalism related to strange phenomena? You talk about strange phenomena.
Yeah, that's a good question. Again, I feel like mentalism is what takes, a lot of times when a magician decides to transform some of his effects into mentalism, what ends up happening is that the mentalism ends up looking so real that, or I should say the magic ends up looking so real that it's hard to decide for anyone watching it whether or not what's happening is a strange phenomenon or whether it's just a deception. Mm-hmm. And so my feeling is that the way it's connected is that it exemplifies strange phenomenon, and it then brings up this really interesting question in my mind, which is that if it's just an illusion and that illusions don't matter, then how is it that an illusion like that can actually affect reality in an interesting way? I mean, when an illusion becomes that real, how does it not affect reality? And so then the question is, why is it relevant that it's an illusion at all? Because it's still affecting reality. It's still going to change things, and that's the part that for history's sake is what matters the most. And so
and that is very, very interesting that you bring that up. I've always been taught that there are many things around us that are an illusion. Fear is an illusion, whereas danger is not. Danger is very real, but fear, being a state of fear, is a choice. But when a person chooses to engage in that illusion of fear, then it becomes very real, and their whole environment is surrounded with fear. I mean, there's so many things to be afraid of. So it sounds like it's kind of like what you're talking about, in people become invested in the illusion.
Absolutely. And on the opposite end, you have things like chi and chakras and stuff like that. The type of work that you're involved in is is in many ways also kind of like we can say that these are what's going on, but in the end, it's really what our mind is making the connection within ourselves that's actually causing those things to manifest. I mean, we can't take pictures of chakras. I don't even know if we could take a picture of the chakras and have it be the right colors that they say that they are.
Exactly.
I feel that I feel that all of that is a faith that we have within ourselves, and that when we use that, an interesting thing happens. And that's why I find history and the whole and especially mystical history to be so interesting, because though I've never really gotten into the question of the colors, I do wonder to myself at this point, as we're talking about it, who came up with the colors when they first came out? Who decided that,
Yeah, that's an excellent question.
That Pura was red, how did they start with the color red, and how do they, end with violet? I mean, it's just a very, very interesting, it's an interesting question to start asking yourselves, and that's what I do in my book. Basically, I take a lot of different ideas, everything from spirits and from ghosts and spirits to qigong and the chakras, to numerology, to palm reading, and then everything and it begins all with just mind games and brain tricks that you can do to amaze your friends. But then it kind of steers you into this other direction where you say that we basically are now saying, okay, so there's this art form in which there's a deceptive nature to creating effects that look like real mind reading, but that really aren't mind reading. And so if we were an alien race looking down on what used to be humanity, and we find out that an aspect of their history ends up being an entire question as to whether, pardon that phone, as to whether or not this comes from whether or not it actually comes from a place that's relevant. Why would we come up with fake mind reading unless it came from something? Maybe it was something. Maybe there were times in which people could read minds, or maybe there is a way for people to read minds, and we just haven't fully tapped into it. And so I feel like there's a lot of clues in mystical history and stuff like that, where we kind of have to ask ourselves, okay, so, well, could there be reality behind this? Is there something that is genuine behind all of this?
I think those are excellent questions, and certainly it is very appropriate for people to ask that question. Is this relevant? Is this real? Or is this a fraud? And there are a lot of personalities out there that are very fraudulent, who do like to manipulate people and pretend, which is very unfortunate. And then there are a lot of authentic personalities out there who truly want to assist. And I love that you're presenting all of these questions, because I've always been taught not to take something as a blind faith, to question, to search, to dig, and to discover on my own what's real and what's not real, and what does the mind make up, or what does someone try to make your mind make up.
Right, and and it's not bad to be skeptical, but I feel that it's also good to possibly be skeptical of being skeptical.
Yes, and I agree. I always say that I'm one of the most skeptical people out there, even though my work that doesn't quite match with the work that I do besides Journey for Truth Radio. But what are some strange phenomena that you have experienced?
Well, gee, I've experienced lots of crazy things. Do you know, by the way, I know you're from Colorado, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know a guy by the name of Chris Moon?
No.
Okay. So Chris Moon, so one of the weird things that happened to me like a few years ago, and it's one of the stranger things that has taken place, people are always asking questions like, are there spirits? Are there things? Can we talk to dead people and stuff like that? And I've always been very curious about that myself, and have never really experienced anything like that. Minus maybe a few Ouija board experiments when I was young that I wouldn't be able to tell whether as soon as you get old enough, you start to deconstruct those things as not being real. So just a few years ago, I'm a full-grown adult, and I'm at this college conference, and I'm with the two ghost hunters, Chris Moon and Chris Fleming. But Chris Moon was sitting somewhere else at the time. Chris Fleming, and I were sitting down with another comedian, and we're just having a beer, and I say to him, so tell me about this weird electronic stuff that you guys use, because I don't know really anything about that stuff. And he goes, I'll show you. And he takes this thing out, and it's basically an AM/FM radio that moves backwards and forwards through the stations. And he starts asking it questions, and it really sounds like it's just going through the stations. But every time he asks it a question, it responds in this really uncanny way, like it's actually speaking English, and we're all three interpreting it as saying what it's saying. So he says, is there anybody out there who'd like to talk to us? And the thing says yes, and it's really clear and defined, and we all hear it. And then he says, we're not sure if that was just a coincidence, but can you give us something more, like a countdown? And suddenly it starts spitting out numbers. It starts saying that it's not in order, but there were like maybe about 4 or 5 different numbers that kind of spit out through the radio. And it sounded like, some of them I can say maybe sounded more like numbers than they might have actually been numbers. But regardless, it did sound like numbers. And then he says to the comedian that was with us, is this guy named Donnell, and African-American comedian, and he says, can you tell us his name? And he points to Donnell. And I'm thinking in my mind, there's no way that this thing is going to say anything at this point. And the thing goes, Don. And apparently Donnell, his friends and family call him Don, just literally freaked out and just kind of stood up and was just frozen. And at that point, he kind of had enough and he had to leave. And so it was really, really crazy. And the next morning, I ended up with Chris Moon, and he wanted to show me his Frank's box, which is another particular type of spirit electronic voice phenomenon box that works slightly differently than the one that Chris Fleming had. And he shows me his box, and I start talking to it in the same way. I go, is there somebody that'd like to speak to me? It says yes. Is there any can you give me any numbers, like a countdown? It said like 224. And I said, am I going to make it home tomorrow knowing that there's a snowstorm coming up the turnpike, and I had to drive from Boston to D.C. and there was just nothing but static. And so I thought to myself, maybe I should ask it another question. And I go,
not a good sign.
Right, I go, am I going to hit snow? And then the thing goes, snow, snow, snow. And like 3 voices called out the word snow, and they weren't the same voice either. So it wasn't like somebody on a walkie-talkie or something. Huh. And then I said, am I going to hit traffic? And then I hear like almost like a weatherman's voice or a traffic controller's voice, and I hear the word say delays. And so now I'm, so now I wait the next day. The next day I wake up, it's a sunny day in Boston, there's no snow at all, and I drive in an Audi, so, I'm pretty confident that even if I do hit snow, I'll be okay. And suddenly in Bridgeport, Connecticut, somewhere around Bridgeport, I hit this major snowstorm, and it hit us by surprise because there was just a lot of snow that came down at the same time, and suddenly the roads were like filled with slushy ice and stuff. And suddenly my Audi starts spinning out of control. And I was praying that, I wouldn't hit anybody. Unfortunately, I didn't, but I hit the other side of the curb on the right-hand curb and bumped over. I ended up on the service on an on-ramp from a service station, and snow is just piling down on the windshield, and I'm thinking delays, and it was really, really one of the crazier things that's ever happened to me, and especially the phenomenon of the voices taking place. I would have never expected those voices to actually come out of out of something that felt so random. It felt actually so coincidental that those voices were coming out that I was riveted throughout the entire time that you could hear these voices come out of the thing. And then on top of it, it predicts this, it predicts snow, and it predicts the fact that, I'm going to be delayed getting home the next day.
So after that entire experience, what was your belief? What did you end up in terms of believing regarding that?
I still have no idea what to think. And it's one of my favorite stories, just because in my heart, I know that I had an extra person there, in the form of Donnell Rollins, who's actually a pretty famous comedian. I tried to contact him via Facebook to try to get him to put him in my book, but he never got back to me. So I'm going to assume that maybe he doesn't want to be known as somebody who's being chased around by a ghost. But I know that that's one of my favorite stories, just because as I get further and further away from that story, and it's now been like a good 7 years or so since that's happened to me, and I know that what's happening to me is I want to disbelieve my own story. Like, I'm actually trying to come up with logical ways as to how any of that stuff could have happened, and yet, because Donnell was with me at the time, I had that third party there who could actually affirm everything that was happening as it was happening. And each moment it took place, because had it just been Chris and myself, I might question who was controlling the situation. But it was just that having that third party there that just helped me realize, okay, I can remember this as this guy here was my witness to this thing happening, and even though he's a witness that doesn't want to step forward, I know that it happened with him, and it was one of those things where, as far away as I get from it, I can always remember that, those were the things that it was saying at that time, and we were confirming off of each other that was what was going on. And so that part wasn't an illusion, at least, to my mind. Mm-hmm. And so,
well, it doesn't sound like an illusion.
So those electronic voice phenomena things are very, very strange to me. And and what was weird about that was that I ended up telling a very close friend of mine, Jerome Finley, shout out to Jerome right now, about this whole thing on the way home from getting my rental car and stuff. And I knew that he would be the only person who would actually believe me. And suddenly he bought himself $2,500 worth of ghost hunting equipment, and one of the things that he bought was a similar type of device, but it measures like the electromagnetic field in a room, and it translates it through a dictionary program so that it's spitting out actual words like via computer voice. And so he's playing with this, basically listening to it 20 minutes a day just to hear if he can come up with anything. And suddenly one day he calls me up and he says, I'm just going to put it out there might be a plane crash. And I said, well, what makes you think that? And he says, well, because I'm listening to my Ovilus 3 and I'm hearing words repeat themselves, and they're kind of scary words like crashing and fire and screaming and airplane and stuff like that. And so he says, and this has now been happening for 2 days in a row. So I'm hoping nothing will happen, but I'm just going to put it out there and let you know this is what's going on. And so I take the note, and the next day was the day that Polish President Kaczynski died in a plane crash.
Wow.
And so it was interesting that he was in Salt Lake City at the time when this took place. And he calls me up in D.C., and we're all waiting for like an American plane crash, but it ends up being in Warsaw the next day. And so it was weird that he would say that to me, and then that would happen the next day, because it's almost like a non-hit because it happened on the other side of the world. Yet it was on every single newspaper the next day. So it was just one of those things where you're like, okay, well, that's very strange.
Those are two very interesting stories. Now, you also talk about that everyone can access their intuition. What steps might you offer in people wanting to begin that process?
Well, I do a lot of that in my book. I have a whole section at the very last part of my book, State of Mind. The man who knows reveals the secrets of mind over matter. That's the part in which I'm revealing the secrets of mind over matter. I basically end the entire book with all kinds of ways of experimenting with things. So you know, I have a section on numerology, and basically there's a way of being able to get your life path number by adding up all the numbers that correspond to your birthday, and reducing it down to a single digit, and so I have these really nice interpretations of the numbers 1 through 9, and I just basically invite people to add up the numbers of their birthday and check out what it says in the book, and it's interesting because when I was writing the book, I was basically just walking around with my computer everywhere, and occasionally I would meet people and I'd ask them about their numerological life path number. I'd show them how to do it, and then I'd just pull it up on my computer and say, "Here, read this and tell me if this is you." And they would be astonished, and we would do this. I would do this at bars with like groups of people, and they'd all have their different life path numbers, and it's interesting because when you do that, you tend to feel that the one number that is you is different from the other numbers that correspond next to it. So that's one way of being able to do it that I mentioned in the book.
Okay.
You know, other ways, you know, involve things like understanding palm reading, understanding the law of attraction. I have an interesting law of attraction prayer, which involves putting a search bar, like a Google search bar, in your mind, and then typing in within your imagination into that search bar what it is that you desire, and instead of Google above the search bar, you're just imagining all of the things that you connect with, all of the people, places.
That's a great idea.
You resonate with, sort of floating around it, and then when you hit enter, you imagine a bunch of links show up, and you click on the top link, and you grab a piece of word, like maybe 1 or 2 words that kind of come through as pieces of advice that you can take back with you, and something that you can just kind of meditate on while you're waiting for whatever that is that you're waiting for to come through. And so once you do that, you just breathe in and imagine everything kind of moving into your heart, and then you breathe out and open your eyes and imagine everything kind of moves out and becomes a part of your reality. And
sounds like a great exercise to really use your mind to begin creating your reality, visualizing your reality. And we are almost out of time. And there is one more question I really want to ask you. I know you experienced in your childhood feeling alone. There was some bullying. And when you look back at your childhood and you look at those experiences and you reflect on how successful you are now and how much you've accomplished and how much you've learned and how much you've experienced, do you think about anything in particular when you think about your childhood and the bullies that bullied you?
You know, I try not to think about that too much. It's interesting that you should ask that, though. I was just hanging out with a couple of friends last night. I have an arrangement at this really nice restaurant in Washington, D.C., where I perform for them a couple of times, and they basically just give me free rein to come in and entertain my friends and stuff. And so I have this connection with this 4.5-star restaurant in Washington, D.C. And I also have this. I also had the situation which just recently happened, in which I was offered to live in a house that was a mansion in this really nice area outside of D.C. in Clifton, Virginia. And so a friend of mine, the same friend who was with me last night, had come out from Alberta, Canada, to visit me at the mansion, and I took him out to dinner at this 4.5-star restaurant. And meanwhile, I'm telling him all of my woes and stuff like that, and he's going, "I don't know what's the matter with you, because I'm looking at you. I'm looking at you hanging out in this mansion. You're skateboarding on the first floor of the mansion, and then you're taking me out to this nice restaurant." So, because the way I'm looking at it is that if I was your childhood self looking into the future and seeing who you are right now and skateboarding around in the first floor of this mansion, I would be thinking, that guy is really cool. And what I would say to that childhood you is, I would say, guess what? You're a magician. and that would just sort of send it up over the top. So, I mean, I do believe that in many ways I have followed my dreams. I do believe that I have not let anything in my way or hinder my path to being able to do what it is that I want to do. And I have to say that is the thing that has made me the most happy in my entire life. And I couldn't think of living a life in any other way.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Now, what is your website and where can people find your book?
Well, you can get my book on Amazon, and it's available on Kindle, I believe, for a very good price right now. It's called State of Mind. Again, the Knows reveals the secrets of mind over matter is the subtitle. If you Google "The Man Who Knows," which is a crazy title that a reviewer from someone, a woman who came out to see me in Las Vegas and wrote in her review, "You really are the man who knows," and that just kind of stuck. So, I feel like so if you Google "The Man Who Knows," you will actually find me probably near the top, if not at the very top of that Google ranking. And my website is themanwhoknows.tv. Again, on Amazon, I have both my books, State of Mind and Picture Your ESP. Both are fun books, fun reads. I'd say that State of Mind is a lot meatier in terms of stuff to look into. Picture Your ESP is actually a coffee table self-test book, which allows you to test your own intuitive abilities every chance by going through sort of a picture book. And it's a fun little read as well. Besides that, I'm going to be performing tonight and tomorrow night in Baltimore, Maryland. This is going to be in the future, so that's neither here nor there. But if this comes out before March the 3rd of 2016, I am going to be performing in a show called The ESP and Espionage at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. And tickets are on sale right now on their website at the internationalspymuseum.com website.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Alain, for being a guest on my show this week.
Thank you for having me again. It's so nice to meet you. I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yes, me too. And thank you, listeners, for joining me here as well on Journey for Truth on Spreaker.com and on YouTube. Until next time, have a fantastic week.